Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. Today on Races of the Worlds, we are going to take a look at a very old off-world race by the name that we know as the Drakes. Okay, now, Drakes are... We'll start with the physical side of it and move from there. Okay, first and foremost, they range on average from 12 to 15 feet in height. Okay, to put that in perspective, that means a normal drake can likely look into a reasonably large one can look into your second story window. Now, when people talk about, why don't these creatures reveal themselves to the general public? Well, think what would happen. Here you are, 5.5, 6 feet tall. Even if you're a tall human, you're 7. You're coming up to their waist. Now, these guys they range in color across the board. Most of them, they are separated into different races, if you will. And yes, in the Drake's case, they do look at their different races as different social standings. And much like humans, they have different skin colors, or different scale colors in this case. There are variations in the pigmentation. Okay. But their scales are dependent on the size of the individual. Smaller scales around the finer points in their body, such as on the fingers. Much like people have different sensitivities on skin, Drake's scales are primarily one color, and that depends entirely on their race. Now, something I do have to add, I'm going to have to add it because I'm in the middle of redoing this book, or more to the point, adding to it. This book here has 59 different races I've personally dealt with, but I'm just looking at the Drakes for today. Okay, now, humans call them reptilians. In reality, they do look like reptiles, okay, but they are not reptilian by nature, if you will. Okay, they are their own species. They are not a Terran reptilian. They just look like it. Much like I think there's about a dozen other reptilian races I've dealt with. Okay, now these gentlemen they do have 3 fingers and 1 thumb. Okay, talons on both hands. The large ones do have wings. And they have a semi-prehensile tail. They've got a controllable tail. When I say semi-prehensile, I think that's the wrong term for it. It's kind of along the lines of the Komodo dragon's tail or of a crocodile's tail. It can be swept back and forth. Yes, they can use it to to devastating effect in combat. Okay, when they give birth, they lay eggs. Okay, their eggs are all moved to a hatchery. Now, because this is a monarchy with a patriarchal hierarchy, okay, the royal eggs, they're still moved to the same hatchery because that's where the eggs are all taken care of. Okay, but they are put in their own little area and cared for specially by dedicated caretakers. Okay, and with the Drakes, they are right off the bat. The royalty is treated specially. Okay, now the royalty of the Drake community, if you will, of the Draconian Empire, they are off-worlders, as in they did not originate on Earth. They originated on another planet. Have some of them shown up here? Absolutely. Okay, and their ancestors, well, I shouldn't say their ancestors. I do believe, and I'm still looking into this, I do believe that there is a link between the Arawa and the Drake. Okay, I haven't looked entirely into that yet, so I'll have to get back to that and let you know. But what I do know is if you look in the sky, periodically, you will see a cigar-shaped ship. Okay, but here's the thing. There are other races that have a cigar-shaped ship as well. These ones, the Drakes, They only have one bank of windows running the length of the ship horizontally. Okay, and it runs set at roughly the midpoint of the hull. Okay, there are other cigar shaped ships. Some have two banks of windows, some have none. Okay, but the Drakes have one bank only. Okay, they are silver in color because it's a aerodynamic ship. It works nicely. Doesn't turn worth a darn in atmosphere, which is why you usually see them traveling straight. Okay, now when they deal with their society, like I say, is hierarchical in nature, meaning that their top says this is the way you do it, and everybody below them has to follow that law. Now, here's the reality behind it. Where it comes to their justice system, okay, if you do not do exactly what you're told when you're told, you get one firm warning, which could be any number of things. It may be, if it's a child, it may be a cuff across the room, as in smack the kid hard, drive him across the room, look at him, and go, don't do that again. The second warning, and this is done right on the spot. It's not something where you take a kid off into a corner and discipline them. The second warning, they get killed. And the moment they get killed, they now become part of the menu. Okay, Drakes, like most reptilians, and you'll understand why in half a second, Drakes do not waste food. And because of their societal culture, because of the fact that they do believe in one entity, in one higher entity, they call it the Great Drake. But because of that, when a child dies, or an adult for that matter, and we'll get to them in a little bit, okay, the child is now devoid of life. What makes the child is gone. Okay, so therefore, you're dealing with a chunk of meat. And meat is, considering they are carnivores, kind of a necessity. Now, don't kid yourselves. When we're talking about them being carnivorous, they still eat vegetables. Okay, the ones that live by the sea are still fishermen or still farmers. And what I mean by farmers is they farm seaweed. Okay, they farm seaweed, they farm algae, and this makes up their necessary vegetarian intake. Okay, now the reality is some of these drakes will also eat rock. Okay, because of the acid in their system, they can break it down. Especially if you take something like pumice, which breaks down really fast. Okay, pumice and sandstone, it tastes, in my opinion, way too granular. I can't imagine why. And yes, as a child, I did try sand. You probably did too, but... Okay, now, the drakes do have a tendency of looking at every race, even of their own species. Every race, you will find they look down on other races. Part of that is because, well, they're 15 feet tall. You figure it out. Okay, the other part is they literally believe that they are better than everybody. Now, they do not, much to their chagrin, control the Council of 12. Okay, because drakes inherently have a very prejudiced outlook, and they are very much of the opinion they should be running everything. But they're not stupid people. Okay, they've made their mistakes in the past. From their standpoint, when a war breaks out, the drakes on the whole don't get involved because, frankly, it's beneath them. They will, however, at the end of a war, step in and take over. Because to them, it doesn't matter the situation, they should be the ruling class. Now, this does not mean they will interfere with anything on a racial level. Okay, you'll end up with a war taking place somewhere on another planet because we haven't seen it on Earth yet, because frankly, Earth is a protected planet. But the drakes will move into a planet, a war will break out, and then one or two of them will step in and go, I'm going to run this planet from here on. And given the volatility and the brutality of their way of life, it's not hard to understand why somebody that is 15 feet tall with armored skin can very quickly take over a lesser species, a lesser evolved in the way of combat. Okay, you take somebody that does not have armored skin, like humans, for instance. Drakes will make short work of them. Okay, and as you can picture by their size, musculature is also a very high issue. Okay. Now, these races, we are talking literally millennia ago. Way back. Okay, and don't ask me exactly how old they are, I don't rightly know. But way back, they started to expand their empire. But like what humans have done, and what many corporeals have done, they expanded too fast. And they covered great expanses of interstellar space. But they expanded too quickly and couldn't hold the empire together because they ran into problems with finance, with being able to afford to keep it up and running. They ran into problem with communication lines at that distance because understand, drakes are not telepathic. Some of them have developed it to a rudimentary level, but not we're not talking about over light years. Okay, so they did develop technologies, they developed communication lines and transportation methods, but because of their control factors, they did not bother with this idea of let's develop matter relocation devices. That was something that came into existence for them only after they joined the consortium. So they did that, they expanded, they moved out to multiple systems. And I can't begin to give you numbers, but what I do know is they reached a certain point and they had to pull back. They had to cut off, they had to abandon some of their children. Okay, so they pulled communication back from the outlying reaches. Okay, and you end up with a few offsets. Okay, because the drakes, when they left the people behind, they just cut off communication with no warning. All they did was they'd already had everything set up so these worlds could run on their own anyway. And they had kept their technology up commensurate with their own. But when they reached that point, they finally went, no, we can't do this anymore. And one monarch, like millennia back, cut the communication lines and cut the support lines. Net result, we have the Srazazians that developed on their own line, on their own evolutionary path. We have the Tormenon, and we have recently found out that the Kamalians are also a descendant race of the Drakes. And they all develop their own outlooks. This is why when people talk about the Draconians, or about the Reptilians rather, being one way, we have to understand they aren't. Okay, there are multiple different races, but those three races are direct descendants of the Draconian Empire. When the Empire cut communication, these three offshoots were left holding their own. They were left taking care of themselves and figuring out a new way of building things. Some of them developed decently. Some went a little bit more on the, shall we say, self-serving direction. But the Drakes themselves continued on. They took their empire and they built it the way they would. And they try to maintain dominant control. They, instead of expanding further and further out, what they did was pick more and more of the planets inside their already existing empire and conquered them and took them over. What they had been doing was, they started out, picture this as the empire. And then all of a sudden what they did was they branched out in all these different paths. Okay, expanding really quickly on long, tenuous lines, communication lines and what have you. And they did end up with things happening where we'll try English with that. They ended up with the supply lines being cut off by other races in the area. Something I have not added that I did not put in the two videos that I've done. One on the Srzazian, I think I've got one on the Tekla. I'm just double checking to see. Does not look like I got one there, so I'll have to do that. But when the Draconians started to pull back their empire and their supply lines, the Tekla moved in particular and terminated the supply lines and the communication lines between what became the Srzazian Empire and the Draconian Empire. Net result, the Srzazians and the Tekla have been at odds ever since. Okay. Like, I'm only just starting to piece some of this together because we are talking about history and that gets a little confusing. But the Draconian Empire is still a viable empire. The problem with it, on the other side of that, is they still believe, even the few of them that have shown up here, still believe that they should be running everything. They should be treated as royalty because that's what they are. Even the lowest of them, even the lowest of the Draconian species, or not Draconian species, but of the Draconian races, even they feel they should be treated better than everybody else. Of course, needless to say, the Draconians to the Draconians, that can be a bit of a volatile situation. Now, I do keep these ones a little shorter than the full length. Okay, than the journey. I try and keep these to about the 15 minutes. But just a reminder. Okay, if you look at the video below this, at the information below this video, you'll find a list of books available that I've written. One of which is Races of the World. Okay, and that is this one here. Okay, in print, ready to go. I'm in the middle of working on the pictures for it. Okay, but it can be ordered directly through me. I'd love to hear your comments. Okay, in the comments below. If you've got questions, absolutely ask. And I'm going to let you go for the time being. But just a quick reminder, the first Friday of every night, of every month, it's only Friday once a night, the first Friday of every month, I am on spacedoutradio.com, okay, talking about different races, different cultures, okay, different alien technologies, okay, where I answer through the chat rooms, and there are many of them. I answer audience questions through those from 9 p.m. Right now, I think we only run to 11 p.m. I think it's been shortened a little. But absolutely, drop in if you've got questions. Drop in, ask your questions. If you've got questions or you've got comments, I'd love to see them below in this video. Until then, I'm going to let you go, and I will be back again another day. Take care of yourselves and each other, and for pity's sakes, stay positive.